You're listening to the Jōrni Podcast. How do we begin to find our way back after the life we built has fallen apart? Stay with me for today's profound episode. This episode contains adult subject matter, and some listeners may be triggered by this content. Listener discretion is advised. Hi, I'm Petra Brunbauer. What if everything we've been told about holistic health, healing, and well-being is only part of the story? Because thriving in today's world looks different than it used to. Here, we challenge the narratives, rethink what it means to become human, and explore how that shapes the way we lead, live, and step into our full potential. This is the Jōrni Podcast. Welcome to today's episode. It is possible to build a life that looks exciting from the outside and still feel like we are strangers in it. We learn to perform a version of ourselves so well that we lose track of who we actually are behind the mask and the facade. Alina Roselli is a recovery and transition coach who believes we are in an epidemic of not knowing who we truly are. Through her recovery and coaching work, she is witnessing firsthand how most people are living as smaller versions of themselves without knowing it. She's developed Soul Coordinates, a portrait that bypasses the mind entirely and reveals who you actually are underneath the survival strategies. Her own journey through burnout, addiction recovery, and self-loss is the source of everything she offers. She knows what it is to not recognize yourself. If you've ever felt hollow, stuck, or like something's off but you can't name it, this conversation is for you. Let's meet Alina Roselli. Hi, Alina. It's so great to have you on the podcast today. I've been looking forward to getting to chat with you because we will be talking about personality and bypassing the mind to access something deeper. That sounds really fascinating to me. And I know that you have a lot to share on this that will be so much of interest to our listeners. Thanks for being here today and welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much. You have such a warm and inviting presence, and I just really appreciate the way that you hold space for all of your guests on your podcast. And I also just think that you have the loveliest insights from what people have to share. So I just feel really honored to be here and be one of your guests.
Oh, thank you, Alina. That's so kind of you. And that's, of course, my goal, so that every one of my guests feels that they can share exactly from their heart and what they would like to share with our listeners so that we can open up that space to the world. So thanks for taking the time to join me today. And would you like to start us off by sharing a little bit about yourself and your story or journey, the pieces of it that you feel connect to what you do today, and also tell us what it is that you do today?
Yeah, I honestly had a rough initiation into the life that I live now. I basically, between 2019 and October of 2023, I just had a slow unraveling of my life, and it felt like it would never end. And I felt like I couldn't get traction, and it was a painful 5 years. And I wouldn't say that it ended there, but October 2023 is just where I started getting some traction. So when the unraveling began, I was living the life I thought I wanted. Honestly, I probably from the outside, I looked like I had it together. I had been a hairstylist at that point for 25 years, and I had my own salon. I had a busy book of clients, and I was good at what I did, and I loved what I did. But if I was being honest with myself, I was increasingly becoming more and more exhausted and unfulfilled. And the truth was that every night I was coming home and drinking to cope. And I had a sense why I was drinking. I had no boundaries. in an industry that certainly requires them. And I overworked because I was an enormous people pleaser and I didn't know how to say no. And underneath all of that was just this deep sense of imposter syndrome that it didn't matter what I achieved professionally, it just wouldn't go away. And I never felt good enough. And this is even though I could objectively say that I was good at what I did. So it didn't really make sense. And it was 2019 when something just physically and emotionally snapped in me and I couldn't function anymore. And I was overwhelmed by the smallest things and my body was constantly drained. And I started to have some really dark thoughts that scared me. And so I made the really difficult decision to sell my business. And in December 2019, I walked away from my business and honestly, the only identity I had ever known as an adult. And when that year ended, I was a shell of a person. Unfortunately, 2020 was right around the corner. And so I never had a chance to catch my breath. Instead of healing, I imploded and my drinking got worse and I spiraled into fear and anxiety. And by the time 2022 hit, my drinking had honestly gotten to a place that scared me. And for the first time in my life, at 44 years old, I tried to quit and I couldn't. I couldn't even make it a couple days. And that was a real wake-up call. Here I am trying to heal from burnout, and now I'm like facing addiction as well. So I really spent much of that year just desperately searching for something that would click. I was trying to fix myself. I was going to therapy. I was listening to all the podcasts and going to energy workers and reading all the self-help books, like loving Brene Brown. And I was even doing yoga every day and just not getting anywhere. But then one day I was listening to a podcast and I heard someone describing what it felt like to have no sense of self. And I remember exactly where I was. I just stopped in my tracks because this woman was describing me and she was putting words to what I couldn't articulate. But I knew without a doubt, like, this is the missing piece. This is what I've been missing. I had spent my entire adult life looking outside of myself for answers and needing other people to validate me and just wanting to do things right by looking externally and wanting to be good, but just never thought about going inward. This was a really big aha moment, but now I'm adding something else to the list, which I describe as self-loss. So to wrap this up, I went to an intensive group therapy boot camp where they take your phone, you have no autonomy. It's 7 days of 17-hour days. It was one of the hardest things I ever did, but it broke through my stubbornness and my strong will. And I was able to just very clearly see what I needed to work on. And it was great. And I came home with all of that awareness and every intention of starting to climb out of that pothole I had gotten myself in. But I wish I could say that's where I turned my life around, but I started drinking 5 days later. And that is what plunged me into what I describe as awareness hell. And awareness hell is knowing everything that needs to change and just being completely unable to change it, right? That is a really great way to suffer. And I spent 6 months in that awareness hell. And there wasn't necessarily a rock bottom, but just the daily assault of that awareness hell that got me to October 29, 2023, my day one. And my only commitment on that day was don't drink alcohol, and work on calming your nervous system. Just those two things. That was it. But those two things were goals that were 7 miles high for me at the time, just those two things. And so I was counting hours and then days, and it was deeply unpleasant. But it was different than the awareness help, because this was keeping promises to myself. And this was honoring my wants and needs, even if those needs were just don't pour vodka down your throat and take some deep breaths throughout the day. But in doing that, I watched myself slowly start to say no more. And that started to change my life. And I finally started gaining some traction, and I started noticing some glimmers of self-worth. So today I have a life that I don't want to run away from. And it looks a lot slower. It's intentional, but it's peaceful and it's entirely mine. And I rebuilt a sense of self from practically nothing. And I share this with zero shame, because I needed every single day of those 5 years to become who I am now. And that is why I refer to it as an initiation, because it was truly a death of my old self over those 5 years. And that dying off is what needed to happen in order for me to cross this threshold into the life I'm living now.
Wow. Thank you for sharing your journey and your story. I want to say so far, because I feel there's a lot more to come for you after all of this and discovering these things about yourself. And it kind of makes me wonder how many of us are in that similar place of where we're just living our lives. We're doing this sort of on autopilot, or because our family expected it or society expected it. We might have gone to school or just started work, we didn't have a family, and we move forward from that. And at some point, something happens that really shakes us up, and we question, is this even the life I want? Am I even happy? Is this fulfilling me? So I feel that what you shared with us, it just really picks at, I want to say, that scab that so many of us have, where we start questioning these things. And sometimes that's exactly the point, is sort of in our a little bit later years when we've done the family thing and maybe it's time for a career change. And that's where this questioning happens. And then we have to find ways to cope with it, especially when we might not love the answers that we're getting from ourselves. So thank you so much for sharing that, and for that vulnerability and the courage to share this openly, because I feel so many listeners can relate to that and relate to how they're feeling in their own lives. And I want to ask you, what was the thing where you finally decided, tomorrow I'm not drinking alcohol, and then actually didn't drink any alcohol? So that happened at the end of October. Was there anything in particular that happened around there that made you actually want to take that step, even after all of the other things that you had tried and had done, including that boot camp?
Yeah, I think about that night a lot, and that day, what it was, just the final day that I was going to sit in those patterns anymore. And there was this cycle that I would go through where I was just not standing up for myself and just going with the flow and going along to get along. And a lot of the reason why people stay in their addiction or their dysfunction is because they're scared to lose belonging. And part of my fear was, I'm going to lose my husband. I'm going to lose all of my friend group. I'm going to lose, even though I was a 44-year-old woman, 45, those things are meaningful. We are creatures of belonging. When that is threatened, it's hard enough to have behavior change. It's hard enough to release that substance from your grip. But then if you're doing it alone and you don't have community and you've lost your people, it's really scary. And I think that it was a rock bottom. When I say rock bottom, it was like a swirling pit of burnout, addiction, and self-loss that just reached its bottom. And I don't know what exactly it was. It was really not well timed. We had planned, so it was basically the weekend before we were leaving for Vegas. And before that trip, I was like, I've got to be done. I've got to be done. And We got on the plane, and of course, I'm having alcohol. And I know altitude can trigger tears, but I had a meltdown on that plane that was, I'm really lucky that I didn't get taken out in handcuffs, because people 3 aisles back were handing me Kleenex, and I barely remembered it the next day because I was so distraught. But when I came home from that trip, I actually had my last drink on the plane on the way back to Iowa. And that next morning, it was like, and I can't. And so I think maybe if there was a rock bottom, it was on that plane. But it was really, the decision actually happened before that. And I think what the rock bottom on the plane was me mourning this life, this identity, this self that was going to go away. I knew it was, and I didn't know what was going to replace it. But yeah.
Yeah, I feel that exactly what you just shared is what holds us back a lot of the times: fear of losing that community, and also that sense that we might have to say goodbye to something. We might have to let something go that has been our companion sometimes for decades, our identity, our personality, right? So yeah, I can see how that really would be a question that we might pose ourselves to say, do I really want to take that step? Because the sacrifices and the changes seem almost insurmountable at that time. But I suppose when the pain overtakes that fear, that's when we move forward in the decisions and also in our actions, as you did. Now, what did you find that actually helped you? I'm very curious, because you actually quit drinking. And did you find anything in the sense of things that you were doing or activities that you were doing or certain mindset work that you were doing that helped support you in that? And also, of course, finding your new identity, finding where you wanted to go from there. What was it that you found in that sense that actually supported you in that journey and helped you move forward?
Oh, that's such a great question. And I think that what my answer is, I think will resonate with a lot of people, because as we go through our lives, our soul is there. We're underneath. That truest part of us is underneath there. And I think that my soul was helping me to collect different tools and modalities and quotes and people and teachers and things. Like I said, it really ramped up. I became a yoga teacher in 2011. I worked for Aveda Corporation my whole career. They're very holistic in nature. I had that holistic background and that Ayurvedic medicine. Those 5 years that I was just in deep struggle, and I was external, I was going outside of myself, reaching for all these things, but the things I was reaching for were good. I didn't have that peace to bring it all together. And also, like I said, I think I needed every single one of those days when I coach with my clients who are trying to give up a substance and they're struggling. It's like, there has to be some compassion there for yourself, because sometimes you need every single one of those days to inform you to when you're finally ready, when enough's enough. And so I think I just had enough's enough. For me, one of the books that I read was Holly Whitaker's Quit Like a Woman. And that book changed my life. It just spoke to everything that I believe to be true, which was that alcohol takes women's power away. And I have nothing against AA. I think AA has helped a lot of people. But after reading that book, I could see how AA isn't necessarily helpful for women in today's modern society. And so for me, Holly had her own podcast with her friend Laura McCowan, and it was called Home. It was actually recorded in 2016. But it's still on Apple Podcasts, and there's 200 episodes. I listen to every single one of those episodes. And anything I listen to, This Naked Mind, Annie Grace has countless stories where people just get on there and they tell their stories. Those were my AA meetings. And I spent much of 23 and 24 of those years with AirPods in my ear, just listening to other people's stories. It was other people's stories because I didn't have anyone around me that was living this life. And I desperately wanted to be a sober person. I wasn't somebody who was like, I love the party. I wasn't drinking to party. I was drinking to escape and numb. And I wanted to be somebody that woke up and enjoyed my cup of coffee and went to bed at a normal time and would wake up to a clean kitchen. And I love routine and I love simple pleasures. And I was living a life that did not match that. Yes, I had all of those people in my ear. When I say the internet and podcasts and social media, what that explodes for us. I live in Des Moines, Iowa, and I had the whole world at my fingertips, which is not what people had back in the 1920s and 30s when AA was started. So we're just in a different world. But then beyond that, I've always had a real connection to my physical level. I'm a holistic coach, so I coach around the 4 levels of physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. And physical has always come the easiest to me. So I just poured into my yoga. I have a nature trail behind my house. I lived on that nature trail, just being in the trees and being out in the sunshine as much as I could, and dove into meditation. And as I started doing all of this, I got an accountability buddy through a different program, and she kept me accountable. But I really found that once I was building this new life, that the drinking became way in the rearview mirror. I was just so excited to find who I could become. Honestly, at this stage of the game, it's really about really enjoying the life that I have with all that I built. It's not about I have to do those things to keep me away from alcohol.
Yeah. And I think that also brings us back to how do we actually then discover after we have gone through, I don't want to call this like a dark night of the soul, but how do we actually discover what fills us up? I imagine that we ask ourselves those questions and we discover along the way the things that we're doing to cope. As you discovered, alcohol was coping mechanism in that journey, but wasn't very supportive or helpful in the actual healing journey. How do we go about then actually finding out what we want to fill this space with, like how we want to build this new identity that has to come along? Because when we mourn something, when we let something go, and when we cut something off that no longer serves us, it does leave a void, it leaves a space. And how do we fill that with something positive for ourselves? And how do we actually find out what that positive thing could be for ourselves? You said before that you're living a life that you no longer want to run away from. So how did you go about discovering the things that actually make you feel good and give you energy and put joy and pleasure in your life?
Oh, that's such a nice reflection, because that's absolutely true. You can't just take away something and something else is going to come back in. And when you can be intentional, that is where the magic is. And that is where I think I found it so fulfilling to keep going, because I was just getting more and more myself. And one of the things, if we're going to talk about personality, is that most of us think that our personality is who we are. But our personality is just a coping strategy. It's a learned response of how we kept ourselves safe, mostly before the age of 7, which is really scary, because how much of your life do you remember before the age of 7? And that is informing much of how you behave now, and how you behave is how you create your world. And what our personality is just how we learned how to be safe, first and foremost, but also how we got love, how we learned to be, how we got acceptance, and that big word belonging. How did we find our belongings? But also just staying out of trouble. So we think this is who we are, but our personality, how we move through the world. Like when I was moving through the world as an addict with burnout, who had no idea who she was, that was a personality that I didn't want anymore. I didn't want to live that way, but I had adapted to conditions in my life over time. And those adaptations just became a habit. And when I got to 44, it was a breaking point. It was like, this is going to either kill you, completely take your life away, or maybe you could do something different. And I think The famous drag queen RuPaul has the spot on quote for this. And she says, "We're all born naked. All the rest is drag." And when I heard that, I was like, and I just heard it a year and a half ago, I was like, oh my gosh, that's it. That's it. Because the naked part that she's referring to is our soul. That is how we come in. And I love the Disney movie Soul, where all the souls are jumping into the body, talking about what kind of personality they're going to be or whatever. And we all have a different soul. It's not a blank slate. It's who we came in uniquely as. But then when she says all the rest is drag, that's our conditioning and our programming that turns into our personality. And what needs to happen for a lot of us, and sometimes that breaking point comes in our 20s. For me, it was my 40s, but for some people, they're in their 60s or 70s looking at this stuff. It's never too late and it's never too early. But sometimes what we've had is a particular wig on for too long and maybe too many costumes overlaying each other. And what would it look like to change out the wig and dance to a different song?
Wow. I find that really empowering. And thank you for sharing that. I'm curious how you worked with, I want to say, the emotions that come up during all of this, because of course you experienced your own dip into those emotions on the plane. That was, I imagine, quite profound for you. But going forward, how do you work with if there is guilt or shame that comes up, if there's sadness that comes up around everything that is happening, frustration, confusion, maybe we even feel a lot of anger at the situation, or why is this happening to me, or what is happening to me? How in all of this did you process all of these emotions that came up, and how did you find a way to give yourself that self-love, that self-compassion, and a bit of that grace that it takes to heal through these experiences? Because that, I think, is one of the more difficult things to figure out and then actually implement in our lives.
Yeah, what you're naming is the part that maybe keeps people stuck for way too long, because it's really uncomfortable to feel feelings. And we're not taught in this culture how to do that. We're taught how to suppress and make everybody else comfortable, or how to distract and numb ourselves. Like the whole world has that at their fingertips. And it's increasingly becoming real easy just to sit on the couch and watch Netflix and just say, not today. But in order to feel better, we have to become better feelers. We just have to. And in order to do that, we have to, there's a few ways that we go about doing that. But first and foremost, I think, is dropping below the neck and getting into your body. And most of us live from the neck up. And we live in a very left brain society where everything is so mental and everything is thoughts, and we're just really stuck in our heads. But that's where we got stuck in the first place. And being disconnected from our bodies is really not useful. It really, the anxiety and the spinning and the overthinking is all up in the head. But once we drop down into our bodies, it makes it so much easier. So first of all, like it's not always natural for most people. So again, I like, whenever I work with people, I like to find what is most comfortable for them, because like I had somebody say to me, like, don't tell me to breathe. Everybody's telling me to breathe, and that's just stressing me out more. And like, I totally get it. Like sometimes when you're panicking, the last thing you want to do is focus on your breath. So there's all different ways about going about it, but there is so much wisdom in our bodies. And when we're able to really slow down, we can't feel our feelings when we're going 60 miles an hour, 3 lattes deep with a checklist that never gets done. So it's really important to slow down. And when you slow down, like, what makes you naturally feel good? Is it a walk in nature? Is it laying on your couch and listening to binaural beats? Is it dancing with your body when nobody's watching to music that you love? There's all different kinds of ways to tap into it. But once we can really learn how to regulate ourselves and come back into center, because we can't feel our feelings when we're in fight or flight. And most of us are stuck in fight or flight. And we're not meant to be that way. We're meant to go to fight or flight for information and then come back to baseline. That's kind of step number one, is let's get you back into baseline. And there's all different kinds of ways to do that. And I find that nervous system regulation is kind of in a moment right now. There's a lot of talk about it. I wonder why. There's just countless ways. Sometimes just taking an Epsom salt bath for me feels amazing. And then I can start to focus on my breathing and then feel like what's going on with me. And I'm just taking that time to really be present with it, because this isn't my original thought. That somebody came up with this, and I don't know who off the top of my head, but most emotions run through us 60 to 90 seconds if we feel it. So it's that stopping and feeling. And I do it like the way I do it is if I'm raising a 14-year-old daughter right now, and there are times where something happens and I'm fully triggered and I know it's from my own childhood and I'm a mess. And I'll go into my closet where I do a lot of my processing, and I just try to slow down. And I'm like, where am I feeling this in my body right now? And oftentimes it's in my chest, or it's in my throat, or it's in my stomach. It's somewhere. And I just breathe into it, or I pay attention to it. And the thing is, it's not wrong to be feeling that way. Whatever your feeling is, if it's anger, if it's resentment, if it's disgust, we have all of these feelings. They're information, and none of them are bad. And I think sometimes in the personal development community and spiritual communities, it's all like high vibe and love and light. We want to be happy all the time, but it's not about that. It's about increasing our aperture to feel all the emotions, but then not get stuck there. And so when I feel through that, and I actually give myself some time to breathe through it and say, okay, I'm feeling grief right now. I feel really sad, and I'm just feeling sad. I don't tell a story about it. I don't need a storytelling is from the mind. You just feel it and breathe into it. It's magic. It kind of goes away. And then once it goes away, then you are able to respond. And being responsive is a totally different life than being reactive. And I think we all know what it's like to be reactive, especially if you have kids. We all want to be responsive. That's how I try to guide people, how I guide myself to feel the feelings.
That's a really empowering piece of this. And listening to you describe that, it's sometimes just giving ourselves that space that we are just not taught to give ourselves. We do give it to often a lot of other people, our family members, our friends and siblings, but to give this to ourselves is sometimes one of the harder things that we do. So yeah, absolutely. Such an important piece of this, I feel. And Alina, you are now guiding people through this. You're now supporting them on their own journeys. And as you said, unfortunately, this seems to be coming up more and more in people's lives, that we are living with disconnection, with loss of ourselves, loss of identity. At some point, we become aware of this, and then it starts posing challenges in our lives. How do you now work with your clients and with people who are experiencing this? And what kind of things do you offer for them to connect with you on?
Namely, I work with people on how to come home to themselves. And there's all different kinds of ways to do that. I call myself a recovery and transition coach. But really, when I say recovery, it's not just drugs and alcohol. It's people are recovering from all kinds of things in their life. And nobody lands on this earth and has Disneyland for a life. We all have pain points. When we're able to look at those pain points and recover from them and then transition through them, we have an opportunity to use that pain as a portal. And what that portal does is it gives us a gift to access something that is so much more true. And when I work with people, it's all about how can you call your power back and come home to yourself. And I'm very non-prescriptive because just because I saved my own life doesn't mean now I have the prescription for what's going to work with every single 8 billion person on this earth. And what I learned about myself was that I did it my own way, on my own terms. And that's exactly how we help ourselves when we go inside of ourselves and say, what do we want and need? What do I value? What does my life look like? A lot of how I help people is, like I said, starting to just call their power back. And it's not once, it's a practice. It's being slower and more intentional and working through the whole holistic part of yourself. And there's the physical, the mental, and the emotional, which a lot of us are familiar with, but there's a spiritual level that has nothing to do with religion. And what it has to do with is the meaning that your life is. And I think that's the crisis that we are in right now, is this crisis of meaning. We really find it from being able to resource from ourselves and find our own way.
Yeah. We all have to go on this unique journey. I feel there's no cookie cutter recipe that we can give out that will magically work for everyone. So yeah, pieces that work for some of us, pieces that work for others. And then we start putting all of that together. And what do you offer as far as your programs, services, any events or things that our listeners can connect with? What do you have on offer, Alina?
I came across something that I call soul coordinates, honestly, just trying to help myself. And it just blew me away on how helpful it was. And so I started using it with friends at first, and then family. And then I started using it on clients. And it's just amazing in how it helps people. And what I have learned as a recovery and through my coaching is that much of our suffering is just misunderstandings that we have about ourselves and about other people. And also just how disconnected we all are from our own greatness. We really have forgotten how great and unique we all are. And so when I started using these soul coordinates, I was noticing that it's reminding people of their own greatness, and also all these misunderstandings that we have. It just shows how we all come in with different dance moves. Yes, the reason why I find it works is that it bypasses your mind. It bypasses that personality part of yourself. And I take these soul coordinates and turn them into a portrait of basically your naked self. And when you read that portrait of yourself, it just lands as true. And the mind has a much harder time dismissing it. And I'll give you a quick example of this. I was at a symphony recently, and it was beautiful. The music was amazing, and they had some visual stuff going on, and it was all great. And then this man in the symphony stands up with an electric guitar and starts strumming a few notes, and I instantly started crying. And it was just this amazing, I was awash in emotion, and it didn't come from a thought. It didn't come from my head. And that is what this does. It just lands as true. And it's hard to explain. It's closer to astrology or human design than it is Myers-Briggs or Enneagram, because Myers-Briggs and Enneagram and those type of things, they use your mind. What I do is I take your name and your birthday, and it's a combination between traditional Western numerology and Jewish Kabbalah. And what I get from that is 3 numbers, which produce your life path, your soul path, and your destiny. And then I feed it into my AI that I have curated through my extensive study and research and transformational path. And these readings are just killer. And what is so great about them is that they are always compassionate, always loving, even with the hard stuff, because there's stuff in our journey, sometime in our coordinates, that is more challenging. How I work with this is I do standalone soul coordinate sessions with people where I do an intake and I attune the reading to what is going on with your life. And then if you have other people that you're struggling with, I can do theirs as well. In addition to that, sometimes it's like a really stuck issue and they might need a little bit more coaching around that. So obviously I offer coaching services, but I also am starting a group coaching container called the Naked Soul Path. It's on School. And I've developed this holistic program to just address where, why, and how we get stuck in that protective personality. And we use the soul coordinates as a foundation. And it's structured to make it your own path because we all have the answers inside of us. I truly believe that. And this program is designed to make it accessible. So there's lots of community and lots of support tools and all of that.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that. And we, of course, will be linking to all of Alina's offerings in the show notes as well. So be sure to check there on how you can connect with her, find out more about the soul coordinates work that she does. And also, if you are looking for coaching, connect with Alina and see what comes up for you. Everyone's experience is different, but we, of course, would always love to hear about how things are going for you and what you're finding when you connect with our guests on this show. Thank you, Alina, so much for being here today. Thanks for sharing your journey and your story with us. And thanks for sharing your wisdom. I feel this is part of how we heal in collective is also by sharing our stories and giving these little pieces to people that they can then connect with and also apply in their own lives. So thanks so much for your time today. I truly appreciate having you on today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. And everyone, tune into our next episode, which will be coming up. And thanks for joining us today. I appreciate each and every one of you as well. You are the reason that Alina and I do the things that we do as we come together with our guests, our clients, and everyone out in the world going through these experiences. So thanks for being here today. And until next time, take care of yourselves and be well. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen in. If you enjoy the Jōrni Podcast, please support us by subscribing, sharing on social media, and leaving us a review. We appreciate you. And you can find more of The Jōrni on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and our website, thejorni.com. Sending you love and courage, and see you next time.